I never had one great big kapow moment where God made it clear to me. In some ways I would have wished that I would have had that, but oftentimes it's smaller, subtler things that direct a person according to his will. What really nurtured my vocation growing up is my family. Obviously, the fact that we were very strong practicing Catholics was a big part of my life growing up. And again, not just that we went to church on Sunday, but that my dad went to church every day and my mom as often as she could. And so I was joining my dad going to Mass from an early age. The relationship I was able to foster with some of the priests of the diocese, being part of the youth group at St. Joseph's Cathedral in the downtown area, that was also something very important. But it was primarily my family and my family relationships that nurtured it, first of all. In my discernment to the priesthood, I've never had one big aha moment where God made it very clear to me that this is what he wanted of me. It was just a lot of little things. First of all, just through my attendance at Mass, hearing the scriptures, receiving the Eucharist on a daily basis, I felt drawn to the priestly ministry. But also externally, the fact that there were times when, I was a parishioner at St. Joseph's Cathedral, and every now and then one of the parishioners would say, because I was serving Mass all the time. I was up on the altar constantly. There was one point where one of the people thought that I had a twin brother because every time she went to Mass, I was there. But it was something that I would have people say, oh, you'd make a good priest. But it was one particular incident, because I'd been thinking about the priesthood for quite a while. And one particular instant where a friend of mine, and I was giving him a ride home because I had a car, he didn't. I was giving him a ride home one day and he said to me, you're probably going to be a priest, aren't you? And he wasn't a churchgoer. He didn't go to church or anything like that. He knew that I did, obviously. But the fact that he would say that, I thought, well, maybe this is God directing me in this way. In those years of high school and early on university and then into the seminary, I don't remember ever experiencing fear regarding the priesthood. And I think that part of it was probably the relationships I had with priests already. I knew it wasn't always going to be easy. Obviously, I didn't understand completely exactly how difficult certain things were going to be. But the fact is I had some good friends in the priesthood, and so it was something that never really filled me with fear because I saw the kind of lives that they were leading, ministering within the context of the priesthood. Well, you learn, when you go to the seminary, you learn a bunch of theology, you learn all of these different things. But when I got out to the parish, I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know. When I was given the task of coordinating the sacramental preparation program, and I was at a big parish. There was a lot of kids going through the sacramental preparation. I think for First Communions, for example, we had over 200 children for that. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to set up a program. I didn't know how to engage. So I had to sort of go by hook and by crook trying to figure a lot of these things out. And all the way through, again, that whole reality of the administration. I have ideas, but how to actually bring those to fruition, actually put them into practice, that's a whole other question. And so right from the very earliest times, I realized that was going to be a struggle for me. And obviously, I've made a lot of mistakes over the course of the years, but there's a saying that goes like this, and it's going to be kind of funny for anybody listening to this, but it's, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. Most people recognize if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. But usually before we can do something well, we do it badly. And then we learn from our mistakes, we learn from those things, and we try to be better. I mean, I'm still learning. Almost 35 years later, I'm still learning. I don't have control of everything. I have to put a lot of things in God's hands, because I know that I can't do a lot of these things on my own. I need the help of God in order to accomplish what God wants to be accomplished within the context of the parish. Have I experienced loneliness in the priesthood? Well, yeah. It's my thinking, and it's not just based on some wild thinking of my own, but realizing the reality that most people encounter. People experience loneliness no matter what vocation they go into. And so, I've lived alone for the most part throughout my priestly ministry. It is something where I am part of families. First of all, I've got my own family close by, so my brothers and sisters, my parents, my dad's deceased now, but my mom is close by, so I've got my own family, plus I'm invited into many other families to be part of it. So the reality is that the loneliness, I've not experienced anything of a severe nature in terms of loneliness, but when it does happen, I just realize that those feelings are going to pass. They're not going to last forever, and so I endure them as long as they are there, and I let them pass naturally. My greatest joy is always celebrating the Eucharist. But connected with that is the teaching that I'm able to do, because I just find that that's my strongest ability, my strongest gift, is teaching people about the ways of God, about the Catholic faith, all of those different things. And I've been so privileged to have some very, very good teachers, not in the sense of in-person teaching, but some of the books I've been exposed to, some of the things, DVDs, tape series. When I was out in the country, for example, I spent a lot of time in my car. I tried to calculate it at one point, and when I was in Rimbey and Sylvan Lake, I was figuring out if I was averaging about 100 kilometers an hour in speed on the highway, that I was spending 30 to 40 hours a month in my car. And so I started to buy tape series and listening to different talks and those kinds of things. And that really helped me a lot to get to know a lot more, and to help me to communicate that to others. The more knowledge I was able to attain, the more excited I was about imparting that to other people. Well, spiritual fatherhood, the more a person believes, acknowledges, embraces what God is doing for us through the sacraments, the more a person is able to see that spiritual fatherhood in the sense of bringing people to birth through the waters of baptism, nourishing people through the Eucharist, imparting healing to them through the sacrament of reconciliation. All of those different things are an expression of fatherhood, but in many ways you have to have the spiritual eyes to be able to see that reality, and to be able to recognize the fact that not everybody appreciates those realities. They don't acknowledge what really is taking place through the ministry of the priesthood. But also the fact that by being a spiritual father, I experience it in a more tangible way by being part of people's families, to be invited in, to be able to have a place in a lot of people's families, because they do recognize that place of the priesthood and the specific priest within their own lives and within the life of the parish. The advice I would give is, first of all, get a spiritual director. Get somebody who's able to guide you in order to discern God's will. The second thing is that certainly it is a fearful thing when we look at what God might be calling us to, and that applies in many different places in our life, that sometimes the will of God is an expensive will, and sometimes God is calling us down a path that we'd rather not go. I think about that account at the end of the Gospel of John where Jesus says to Peter that one day somebody else is going to tie a belt around you and take you where you'd rather not go. And that's the thing, that's very often we think, we're fearful because we think our happiness is tied up with certain things, that if I can't have this, how can I be happy? But we very often fail to understand that God can provide the joy that we long for, even if we have to give up certain things in order to follow God's will for our lives, that very often God can give us that joy. So I would say, start by discerning. If God is calling you to this, when the person enters the seminary, you're not asked to make a decision immediately. You know, you've got several years to go through it, to see what God is calling me to, what God wants me to do, and to become more comfortable in terms of God's will, and not to rebel against it, not to run away, but to be open to that. And just if God is calling you to that, God will give you the strength to be able to follow through on it.